On today's episode of the show, we begin identifying expectations for various men's basketball players, discussing whether or not Chucky Hepburn is the most valuable player to next year's team, explaining why Reyne Smith is more than just a shooter and why Aboubacar Traore will be a fan favorite. All coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. We begin our series on the show of identifying and discussing expectations for each of the men's basketball players. Chucky Hepburn, Reyne Smith, and Aboubacar Traore will all be discussed on the first installment of the Expectations series. We begin with perhaps the most valuable player, Chucky Hepburn. Now, before we get into more of an in-depth look into his expectations, I do want to kind of lay out a rubric or a guideline. There's going to be 3 talking points for every single player. We'll talk about the impact that the player will have, what role they will likely play, and also a fun little twist comparing them to a former Louisville Cardinal player. So we start out with Chucky Hepburn. The main thing for Chucky is whether or not he is the most valuable player for next year's team. Now, again, all opinion-based, but he is definitely in the conversation. And I think that by the end of this segment of the show, you'll start to see a little bit more as to why I am asking that legitimately and not really trying to be a hot take podcast host or a guy just trying to incite a reaction. Truthfully speaking, with a new team, completely new team, 13 different members on the team. None have played a single minute in a Louisville jersey. You can't underestimate and overstate the value and impact that a veteran point guard will have on this team. In Hepburn's situation, you bring over 100 games started at Wisconsin to this program. And even though he probably won't lead this team in scoring, he will play a vital role for this team on both ends of the court. His impact, it's pretty solid to basically give the offense a level of security, handle the ball well, and be the main facilitator. Defensively, it's a great point of on-tack defending, leading by example, wreaking havoc in opposing backcourts, and being the calming presence when things go awry, because adversity will strike this season, especially early on when you have a new roster. It's going to take some time for this team to gel on the court. Be patient. That's going to be sort of the mantra of the episode, is be patient, because it's going to take some time for players to get used to playing with each other. It's going to take some time for guys to get used to this level of play. Now, Hepburn, it won't, because he's played arguably in a better basketball conference for the past couple seasons in the Big Ten. Hepburn this past season averaged 9.2 points per game, 3.9 assists, 3.3 rebounds. He shot 43% from the field, 32 from 3, 74 from the free throw line, averaging 2 steals per game. Former Cardinal Peyton Siva. Now, let me preface my justification by saying that with each of these player comparisons, I'm not suggesting that he's legitimately going to have word for word the same impact. Having the same impact as Peyton Siva is almost damn near impossible. But the tendencies on the court, the style of play, some sort of the impact, it's very Peyton Siva-esque. And what I mean by that is Hepburn's not going to be your leading scorer, but make no mistake about it, he can still get a bucket when he needs to. He's probably a better three-point shooter, but operates well with the ball in his hands, has a 24% assist rate, so does a great job of creating for his teammates. Now, a lot of times the ball was in A.J. Storr's hands this past season, Connor Essigan as well. A balanced approach in Madison for Greg Gard's squad. Not 24% assist rate, I apologize. 21% assist rate, I should say. And he's a three-level scorer. 48% from the elbow. He does a better job of scoring from the right side of the court than the left side. The statistical numbers actually are fairly different this past season in terms of scoring from the right and scoring from the left. But 61% around the rim. That's about a quarter of his shots that he takes per season. After that, it's sort of mixed in between the mid-range and the three-point line. There is an attention and emphasis on all three levels of the half court. Will operate as the main pick-and-roll man and has come up clutch time and time again for Wisconsin in the same fashion that Peyton Siva did here at Louisville. Also, Hepburn was one of the best on-ball guard defenders in the Big Ten, not only last year, but since he stepped foot on campus at Wisconsin. Peyton Siva was one of the best on-ball defenders in the Big East when he played for the Cardinals back in the early 2010s. So, averaging over 2 steals per game. At every season, he has averaged at least a steal per game at Wisconsin. So, does a good job of reading opposing offenses, jumping passing lanes, active hands, you name it. Point of attack defender that can hedge screens and just attack in a multitude of different ways. Press, you name it. So, great defender. Secondary, tertiary scoring option. And also opportunistic three-point shooter, great facilitator, and great leader. Veteran guy that has been there before. So we talk about the impact, talk about the player comparison. The role, obviously, is to be the lead guard. Now, the team is going to play faster than we've literally ever seen it because Pat Kelsey has one of the top pace of play offensive systems in college basketball. So when I say lead guard, understand that while he may have the ball in his hands the majority of the time over the other players, ball movement is key in this offense. The ball is going to be moving constantly over and over and over. Quick shots. You're not going to have a ton of opportunity for him to just sit at the top of the key and dribble the basketball. It's going to be quick decisions, quick shots, and hopefully second chance opportunities. So statistically, I think that the minutes per game, he's going to start right away. He averaged about 33 minutes per contest. I think that those numbers go down a little bit. I still think that, contrary to popular belief, he's going to play over 30 minutes a game, probably right at 30. Going to be the main facilitator. Great defender, so you have a ton of reasons to keep him on the court for the majority of the game. There's this misconception that, well, Louisville's not going to have guys play over 25 minutes. This isn't the College of Charleston. I don't say that in a disrespectful way, but when you have a Power 5 team with better players, more draft-level players, you can't just play guys 20 minutes a game. That's not how this is going to work. You can't replicate what Kentucky did in 2014-15 season. So statistically, though, I think you're probably going to see a little bit more of the same. 9.2 points per game. He had 12.2 the year prior. But you have Terrence Edwards Jr., Kaysen Pryor, Corin Johnson, and a multitude of other guys. So I could see him averaging right around 10 points per game for this team. Another year of development for him, I think, could help grow that offensive scoring arsenal and repertoire. So excited to see what he's going to be relied upon to do to score the basketball. It's going to really depend on how well he shoots the ball from three. This past year, shot 32%, was a career low, and also had a career low in attempts just by a little bit in 3.3. So he's a respectable three-point shooter, but definitely not like he was the year prior, where 41% on 5 attempts. So if he can get back to that 22-23 level, then we are talking about a completely more dynamic player. So he could end up being a great shooter for the team. Speaking of great shooters, Reyne Smith is going to be relied upon to be Louisville's sharpshooter. But understand this, he's more than just a shooter. He brings some very interesting other things to the team. And I want to discuss a little bit more about that after we tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. It makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With the last-minute killer deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I want to go see a game in the Garden. Boston playing a home game in the NBA Finals. Look, it looks like that team is borderline untouchable. I think that atmosphere would be great. I'm honestly going to look into it. Gametime will be the service that I utilize. I just downloaded the app, and they have a feature called Customize Your Spot, and it's fantastic. You can see the all-in pricing. You can see the views from your seat, and also the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit me 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to the NBA Finals with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, if you are struggling to consistently watch Fox Sports or ESPN because of all the shouting, you need to listen to what I have to say and make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. Look, Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. And it brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Reyne Smith is more than just a shooter. And I understand when you have a sharpshooter that has the level of production that Smith has had in his college career, you sort of put him into a box, meaning that you think of him as only a shooter. And it's not disrespectful that you think he is as knocked down as they say, but it's clear after talking to some people that cover mid-major programs like College of Charleston and going back and actually watching games and watching the film, Reyne Smith is more than just a shooter. Now, granted, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight the three-point shooting and then highlight it again. I mean, he is a fantastic three-point shooter whose impact is going to be directly tied to how well he can shoot the basketball. It is pretty cut and dry. If he's shooting the ball well, then, he raises the level of play on the floor for the team overall. If he's not shooting the ball well, it's not a negative on the court because he can do some other things, but you lose your most dynamic characteristic. Average, these numbers are ridiculous. 8 attempts per game, 39%. Like, that is insane. And if you were wondering whether or not that this is a sustainable method, 7.5 attempts his freshman year, 38%. 7.7 his sophomore year, 34%. Now, he's going to be playing better defenders, better athletes that are going to close out quicker, but Reyne Smith does a good job of catch and shoot situations, spot up, creating his own shot off the dribble, deep threes, you name it. Most of his attempts, and I'm talking like almost actually over, it's like 72% of his overall field goal attempts are on above the break three-pointers. So basically the space in between the top of the key and the corner is considered above the break, the elbow of the three-point line. 41% from the right side and 39% from the left. Incredible. Now, he is 65% around the rim. So when he does put the ball on the ground and take it to the rim, he's able to finish accurately, but most of his attempts are going to be three-point shots. He ranked in the 89th percentile in catch and shoot situations, 90th percentile in spot up. So it shows you the versatility in the variety of ways that he's getting these shots. Catch and shoot, spot up, off the screen, dribbling into his shot. And not only that, it's like limitless range. 18 three-pointers made from over 25 feet of distance from the basket. It's literally like step up to him once he crosses half court, because that's the range he has. It really isn't that big of a surprise in terms of player comparisons here. It's Ryan McMahon. Ryan McMahon was a feared ACC, or a feared shooter in the ACC, got to his shot in many ways, and when he was on, man, he could really light it up. But in his senior season, he was more than just a shooter. He was able to facilitate a little bit. He's not a primary ball handler, but great and willing passer. And I think Reyne Smith is a better defender. At least he was at the mid-major level. I think he's serviceable. He was serviceable in the Colonial Athletic Association. One of the main reasons why they were able to win that league for the second consecutive season was his ability to be the point of attack defender and sort of spearhead the defensive efforts for the Cougars. Now, I think if he can be serviceable at the ACC level, then that is what you are hoping that you can get from Reyne Smith. I think that Ryan McMahon was serviceable. I don't look at him as a great defender or even a good defender, but he was a high-effort guy. But he was also a willing passer, made some good reads, and wasn't a point guard. But when you have a guard that can make the right decisions and still find the open players, the numbers back that up. And obviously the three-point shooting numbers, where he's going to be playing that same impact, that same role that could have the same impact of being the sharpshooter, three-point guy that spreads the court, that allows the players to slash through the lane, get to the rim like Javon Hadley, Terrence Edwards Jr., Aboubacar Traore, even the front court guys, Noah Waterman, Kaysen Pryor, you name it, Kenai Roots, Chucky Hepburn at the guard spot, Corin Johnson. When you have a player that can shoot like he can and demand that much gravity from opposing defenses, it's pretty straightforward. But again, he's not just a three-point shooter. Now, I don't think he's going to be proficient or elite in anything else at the ACC level, but if he's serviceable as a secondary ball handler, who knows, he might be starting some games this fall because of the familiarity with Pat Kelsey's offense. All these newcomers, if you want a player who already knows what's being required from him, Reyne Smith could be a guy like Ryan McMahon his senior season, where he could be a six-man. He could be a guy off the bench playing a ton of minutes. I don't think he plays over 25 minutes. I think he's going to be a player that if he does start, he's not playing the majority of the game. And if he doesn't start, then he's going to be in the rotation. I do think he's definitely in the rotation. I think that those stats take a little bit of a step back in terms of points. He led the College of Charleston in scoring with 12.8 points per game. I think that those numbers take a step back. But I do think that there are, on a nightly basis, he could score in double digits. So then again, you can make the rebuttal that if he makes a couple threes per game, then he's right at that 12 point per game mark. But I think with all of the mouths that you have to feed in this offense, that you're not going to get 8 3-point attempts per game. I think you can probably cut that in half, depending on, if he's firing on all cylinders. If he is on fire, then of course he's going to get more opportunities, but it's going to just depend on the situation from a game in, game out perspective. So Reyne Smith is more than just a shooter, like Ryan McMahon was his final season in Cardinal Red. And I think that he's going to play a very similar role. One player whose role is really challenging to predict is Aboubacar Traore from Long Beach State. But like a former Louisville Cardinal local great, Traore will be a fan favorite very quickly on campus for the Cardinals. We'll explain why here on the next segment of the show. I do think that Aboubacar Traore has an opportunity to give a level of impact that is similar to that of a former Louisville Cardinal local grad. Before we do that, I want to make a quick programming note. This is the end of May. This is the final episode of May, concluding the in-season portion of year 3 of Locked On Louisville. We will now go into the off-season months of June and July. The only thing that changes, we go from 19 monthly episodes to about 12 to 13. So not really many 5 episodes per week, but more so 3 to 4. So just wanted to get that out there so you knew that it's not me slacking. It's just how things are programmed in the offseason. But back to the topic at hand, Aboubacar Traore, the one thing he doesn't do well is perimeter shooting. I mean, 8.7% from the three-point line. He's going to be an opportunistic, once-in-a-blue-moon three-point shooter. But everything else he does screams, and I mean yells from the rooftop, Dwayne Sutton. Again, will he be spot on just like Sutton? No, Sutton was definitely a better three-point shooter with a more versatile offensive scoring toolkit. But Traore is able to affect the game in various ways. You first look at the player type. Traore, sort of like Sutton in size, 6'5", 195 pounds, plays more so like a forward, plays larger than he actually is. Opportunistic shot blocker, great and willing passer, effective around the rim, knows his role, high energy, high motor player. If you didn't tell me who that was, I would say it's Dwayne Sutton. Now, the three-point shooting is a pretty significant portion of the comparison, but no player is ever going to fit to a T with someone else. So Dwayne Sutton is my player comp. And like I said, he's effective around the rim. He knows his role. He doesn't try to do too much in terms of scoring. He has to improve on the turnovers. He turned the ball over way too much this past season. But the 6'5" native of the Ivory Coast averaged 12 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, 4.5 assists, shot 52% from the field, and averaged 1.5 steals, 1.4 blocks. So he does everything very, very solid. And his high energy and high motor, the ability to attack the glass, and just the willingness to be that glue guy. Louisville fans appreciate that grit and that hard-nosed level of basketball more than I would say your common fan, because it feels like that epitomizes like a Louisvillian or a Louisvillian, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. It's sort of the connection there. And I think that Traore will be a fan favorite very, very quickly. I don't think he starts for this team, but I do think he's going to be a high-energy guy off the bench. I think his statistics take a little bit of a step back, but it doesn't matter because the impact is going to span way beyond the box score. People wonder, well, Long Beach State, how well is he going to be able to play against high levels of competition? You look at what he did against Arizona, 14 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block. Had some very good games. Were almost video game statistics, almost quadruple doubles in college for Long Beach State this season. 84% of his attempts came from around the rim. He shot 61% in the paint. Most of his offense is going to be taking the ball to the basket, putbacks, lobs, 24% assist rate. So it suggests that not only is he a willing passer, but he's an effective one. He is an insightful passer. He makes some flashy passes, is able to sort of be a pseudo phantom point forward to where he can get the ball at the top of the key and take it to the basket, but also find cutting players to the rim. And it's a 5.9% block rate. A block rate that high at 6'5" is like, what? You need to make sure that we're talking about the same player here. And we are. He is as opportunistic of a shot blocker as they come. And I think that his on-ball defense, he's a great defender, switchability to where I think that he's quick and agile enough to maybe guard smaller guards, like even ones and twos, but also small ball fives and being able to guard forwards and players larger than him due to his wingspan, his tenacity, and his athleticism and strength. So he's going to be able to do a lot of things really, really well. Now, what does this mean for his role? I think he's going to be that slasher that is being relied upon to be the glue and rebound the ball well and be a willing passer, be an opportunistic scorer and shot blocker, and just be a plus in the box score. It's like one of those players that if you looked at the statistics, the common fan that doesn't watch Louisville would say, man, who's Aboubacar Traore? Like, why are Louisville fans hyping him up a ton? And then you watch a Louisville game and you're like, oh, he is a winning basketball player that makes winning plays. That's the type of player we're talking about here. I would caution fans to now box scores, statistics, averages, they do hold some weight. They do hold some, some significance, like shooting percentages. But if Traore's numbers take a step back and he doesn't average in double-digit scoring, if he averages under 8 rebounds a game, if he's averaging under 5 assists per game, don't let that automatically lead you to believe that Traore has taken a step back, because he is the ultimate box score positive level player on this roster, and I'm extremely excited. Like, he's one of the top 3 players that I'm intrigued the most to see what in the world their role is going to be, because you got to get him on the court in some capacity. But is he a small ball 5? Probably not. In some situations, maybe. But his versatility and switchability on defense gives you some interesting options with the guys that are in the front court, with Terrence Edwards, with Javon Hadley, etc. So just something to focus on. He will be a fan favorite very, very quickly here. So, again, we're going to continue this series into identifying and discussing the expectations for each of the men's basketball players throughout the men's basketball team. To conclude the month, I will say that I don't necessarily know the system that I'm going to have for episodes in the next couple months. I imagine there will probably be more episodes at the beginning of the week, Monday, Tuesday. Wednesdays, there probably won't be. Fridays, there might be, but probably not. I think Monday, Tuesday, Thursday are the most likely days. There might be some weekend episodes as well. We're in the process of trying to get some guests onto the show, some former Louisville Cardinal athletes and standouts. So be sure to stay tuned for what's on the horizon. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you all for consistently liking, sharing, subscribing, rating the podcast on all streaming services. It's been a long season since year 3 started in August. A great year 1 of Jeff Brom. A rather unforgettable basketball season, but a great basketball offseason with hiring Pat Kelsey. I'm so grateful to have seen the show grow, reaching record numbers of viewership in April and now in May of this year. It's really exciting to see. We're going to take a little bit of a step back and relax and talk about some fun stuff over the offseason before we get geared up to start year 4 here in a couple months in August. But that's going to wrap up the month of May, officially the year 3 of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you right back here